And welcome, students. As we discuss a couple technology terms for this lesson, there are a couple of miscellaneous things that we just need to go over to make sure that you have a good foundational understanding with some of the different things that go on. A lot of jargony terms, very technical, so I've tried to break them down for you on an understanding that is a little bit more plain speak. So let's start first by talking about the bits. So when we talk about bits, the first thing I want to talk about is Bitcoin. You probably have heard of Bitcoin in some way, shape, or form, because it's been in the news or it's been in an online article or something like that. Well, this is a form of digital cryptocurrency. And with it being a cryptocurrency, that means that it's have a encrypted nature to it. It's not just like, just regular money floating around. It also is decentralized, which means there's not a single bank or bank, chain of banks or anything that reports it. It's not necessarily exchangeable with normal cash. And because it operates through more of like a peer-to-peer kind of networking protocol, it's not really traceable in the traditional sense of like regular money might be. So like a regular check, we wire from bank A to bank B, you have this kind of a paper trail that keeps track of where your money is. With Bitcoin, it's a little bit harder to do that because it's in this encrypted nature. Let's also discuss something known as bit rate. This is not related to Bitcoin. A lot of these terms are very independent from each other. But bit rate is simply just the speed at which bits are processed. So this would be used a lot with audio and video. So when you have a higher bit rate in your audio or a higher bit rate for your video, that means it's a higher quality because you have more like bits of data that are going to be used like per, like let's say just like per second, per rate, or whatever it is using as its speed. For example, if we're looking at, let's say, an MP3, MP3s might be processed at different rates. So a 192 kilobits per second is going to be a lower quality than that of something of 320 bits per second. So again, higher quality, more information. Now the downsides of that, it's a larger file. So anytime you want more quality with a bit rate, you're going to have a larger file. Similarly, we also have something called BitTorrent. This is a widely used peer-to-peer protocol. BitTorrent allows for sharing of information between two people over a network. C is for computer. So first term, cache. This is frequently used data, typically stored in things like your CPU, in order to speed up access to like your RAM, to your memory of your computer. So these are things that you do quite often, so put it into cache and hold on to that information. Clickbait is our next term. This is simply just a form of online advertising designed to draw on users. Most clickbait obviously is not quite so good because a lot of times the content is less drawing, if you will. It doesn't actually have much value than what the headline may suggest. It's like, top 10 things that blah, blah, blah might happen. But, those top 10 things a lot of times aren't really that significant or valuable to your life meaning. They're just there to kind of grab your attention really quickly. They'll do this sometimes with news articles too. They'll put a really catchy headline out there to try and get your eyes to look at it. But the other problem with clickbait is that you read the headline, but you don't necessarily digest the actual news. Next term is crowdfunding. This is the funding of a project by small contributions from people with a return of a reward. Sometimes you'll see crowdfunding used a lot in video games, for example, where a company will crowdfund, and in exchange for people donating X amount, you'll get some kind of like in-game reward, maybe like a special cosmetic skin, for example. All right, devices for storing, we've kind of have talked about a little bit, but I want to just give some specific examples here. The first, of course, is the CD-ROM, which is not really used too much anymore. The CD-ROM has kind of almost gone to the wayside because of all the better technologies that we have. However, every once in a while, you'll come across somebody that's still hung up on using a CD-ROM. So just want to talk about those because the CD-ROM is a compact disc. That's what CD stands for, compact disc. And ROM is read-only memory. Read-only meaning that once you write the data to whatever you're storing it on, you cannot change it. Now, the storage of a CD-ROM caps out at about 700 megabytes. Now, there are recordable versions of CD-ROMs, such as CDR, CDRW, etc. The differences between those is R just means recordable, whereas RW means rewritable. So the R, once you record it, you can't make any changes to it. The RW, you can write to it, then you can come back later, hey, I want to edit this, you can do that. Next is the DVD, and this is your digital video disc. The storage caps at 16 gigs per second, but that's using multi-layering technology. Most consumer models, like if you were to go to a store and buy just a blank DVD, are going to be about 4 gigs. And of course, just like with the CD, there are recordable versions such as DVD-R, DVD-RW, etc. Now, we've already discussed previously when we talked about storage, other forms such as HDDs, which is your hard disk, SSDs, which is your solid state, and flash drives, and also the cloud. I'm not going to really kind of go over those again here, but I just wanted to bring those up because they are technically part of the devices for storing. All right, we got some E and F to talk about. The first one is an Easter egg, and no, this is not we're going to go out and find eggs filled with chocolate and candies. This is instead a hidden feature in media, usually to amuse the creator or promote some kind of user engagement. This is done a lot in movies, so there'll be like nods to previous works or previous iterations of characters. You also see it a lot in video games where they might put some like hidden gem or other kind of nugget of information that you're like, hey, I understand that reference. Firmware is a type of program code that will bridge the software and the hardware of a computer. A lot of people who are gamers know about firmware because a lot of times you'll have to do firmware updates on your gaming console. Firmware is not necessarily just hardware or just firmware because it's kind of this in-between sort of thing. If we get into our H's here, the first thing is hashtag. I know a lot of you definitely know what a hashtag is, but it is simply just a word or a phrase preceded by the hash symbol. The hash symbol, of course, is also known as the pound sign, so some of you might know it as that, or for the really fancy, it is the octothorpe. Now, usage on Twitter pushed the hashtags usage into mainstream, so really the whole thing with hashtags being used all the time kind of blew up because of Twitter. All right, then we have HTTP, which is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And this is a protocol for transmission of data over a web page, but it's not encrypted. A lot of times this is used to render your web page, because that's its most common use. Whereas HTTPS, however, this is the same exact thing, but you'll notice it has secure on it. That's what the S stands for. This is the data now can be encrypted. So the data has some level of encryption over it, typically with SSL, and now today with TLS, to encrypt the data on your web page and help to verify that the security level is actually authentic. All right, since we're talking about internet, the first thing let's talk about is the IP address. This is a number that defines a device along your network using either IP4 or IP6 protocols. IP4 is, of course, kind of slowly on its way out. It's going to go kicking and screaming. IP6, of course, is the future because IP4 is much more limited in what it can do. It's like only a 32-bit address, whereas like IP6 is a 128-bit address. So it has billions upon billions of addresses that it can use. JavaScript is a programming language that's used to create interactive content within browsers. And TCP/IP is simply just a networking protocol that dictates how data is sent over a network via packets, because you can't send like a whole music file at once. It would congest your network because it's huge. So instead what happens is that file is broken up into little chunks, and then those little chunks are sent over the network, and then they're reassembled when they get to your computer. So that's why when you get a file, it comes in little pieces at a time, and then even when it says like 100%, it has to verify the file because it wants to verify that the file was sent correctly. All right, a couple more things to talk about is megapixels. Right? If you are any kind of hobbyist, for example, with cameras, you're probably very familiar with megapixels because this is just a collection of 1,000,000 pixels that represent a digital image. More megapixels do mean a greater quantity of data. However, just because you have a lot of megapixels does not necessarily mean that the quality itself is, high quality. So things such as like the lens of a camera will also make a big difference. Next up is the operating system. This is the software that communicates directly with hardware and provides an environment for the user. So this is things such as Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, iOS. Those are all operating systems. They are the thing that allows you to interface directly with the computer. Overclocking is, for the super nerds out here, the process of running processors, graphics, or memory at higher speeds than they're normally designed to operate at. So it allows you to push the hardware beyond its, manufactured factory limits, and you can run at higher speeds. And higher speeds means that it can do things more powerfully. The thing is, you don't want to do this unless you have a good understanding of it, because when you start running stuff faster, it does create more heat. And heat is a very big bane of a computer. All right, next up is the partition. This is a virtual split of a hard disk. And it's not physically splitting the hard disk. I'm not like taking a knife and cutting it up, or my SSD or anything like that. Instead, it's done in the, for example, the operating system, and it's going to treat each of those splits as their own disk. Peer-to-peer is our next thing. This is another protocol. This is direct communication between two devices without the need for a centralized server. So computer A is going to talk to computer B, and it's not going to try to first go out to, for example, Google or anything like that, because it doesn't need to. QR codes, some of you might be familiar with QR codes. They are wonderful things because it saves you so much typing. These are short for quick response codes. They're a two-dimensional code used to enhance web pages or contain additional information. QR codes are very, very powerful. All right, as we start wrapping up towards the end, we have resolution, which is the amount of detail that can be displayed on your screen, determined by pixel count or pixels per inch. I'll talk a little bit more about resolution in a second, because there are some specific resolutions that we need to discuss. But first, let me mention streaming. Streaming is simply just the delivery of content that's presented to the user while the user is consuming it. All right. And we talk today about live streaming. Is a very big thing. For example, Twitch is a very popular gaming platform where people can go and watch a live stream of someone playing a game and giving commentary. It's highly advantageous over downloading an entire file prior to accessing it. So even aside from the old days, look at live streams. If you just look at how files used to be, if I wanted to, let's say back in the early days of the internet, if I wanted to watch a video, I would have to download the entire video first before I would be able to watch it. So I'd have to wait for all the packets to come through and reassemble, then I could watch the video. But now with streaming, I don't need to do that. Instead, I wait for those packets to come through, and I can watch the video as they're coming in. All right, so with those resolutions, the first one is Ultra HD, more commonly referred to as 4K, which is 3840 by 2160 pixels. The number of pixels that are in a screen is pretty easy to understand. It's just the more pixels you have, the higher resolution. There's also a 4K resolution for cinemas, and this can be a common misnomer, but cinemas actually shoot at a higher one, which is 4096 by 2160, because it's a widescreen resolution. 3840 by 2160 is more of it has a different aspect ratio. I'm not going to really worry about aspect ratio right now for you to understand that. Just know that when you go to the movie theater, it's a little bit wider than what you might normally have, because a computer usually runs at like 16:9 aspect ratio, whereas like a cinema, it would be more like a 16:10. Our next resolution is Full HD. This is also known as 1080p or 1080 pixels. The reason for that, the resolution of 1920 by 1080 is standard. That's where the 1080p comes from. You also have regular HD, just HD. This is 720p. All right, this is still used a little bit, but it's not quite as common now as the standard 1080p, because a lot of things have pushed to Full HD. The resolution for 720, of course, is 1280 by 720. You'll have sometimes, for example, some other resolutions, like for example, some laptops might run at like 13, I think it's like 1368 by 768, something like that, which is a standard resolution, but it's not one of these other resolutions that are considered to be pretty standard. All right, let's wrap up here. We have toolbars, which are simply just a user interface element that contains buttons and icons that typically assist with navigating content. Most common place you'll find a toolbar, your web browser. Now, one thing is, because there's so many toolbars out there, you can easily download them and add them in. Just beware, there are malicious toolbars that may be bundled with other software. To do things like just change your search engine, change your homepage, etc. Trolling. This is an act of engaging in online behavior that is disruptive or attempts to derail discussions. the worst case defenders of trolling, and like some people just think trolling is just all fun and laughs. However, it can lead to some very negative consequences, such as facing criminal charges, because sometimes people lead to things that are very much in the case of example like cyberbullying. So you have to understand, while some people find amusement in trolling, there can be negative consequences to it. All right, and that wraps up our kind of technology soup that we've had to dive through. I know it's not necessarily the most engaging thing, but there is a lot of technology terms out there for you to kind of digest and understand. So with that being said, I will see you next time.